Garbage management during SHTF concerning the suburban and rural environments. Hey, my friends, this is The Art of Prepping. Let's dive right into this. We've already talked about some of this in the first part when we talked about urban garbage management, but we can do and expand a bit more because when you have property, unlike living in an apartment or a condo, when you actually have property and land that you can work on or do things or store things on, you're going to have a lot more options. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but you really do have quite a bit more capability to deal and to manage with garbage. So first, when we talk about burning your garbage, you can actually have like burn boxes or baskets or burn barrels set aside. So unlike living in an apartment, which you may have to kind of try to seek out something to burn your garbage in, which I was recommending in the last video talking about metal waste baskets or garbage cans, but a lot of places don't have those. So you're in a position, though, in a suburban or a rural area to already have those burn barrels available. They're just ready to go. And typically they're made of like a stainless steel. In case you leave them outside, they don't just break down and rust. So I still would take good care of them when you're not using them. I would tarp over them or bring them inside like a building or something. It could be a barn or a garage or a shed. But yeah, I would definitely have a really nice burn barrel. You could even make them yourself, you know. So I've seen people make them out of like wire mesh. I would go with really heavy duty wire mesh though. And I've seen people take scraps of metal, like bands of metal, and actually make containers out of them. So there's a lot of things you can do. You don't really need to buy these if you're handy with things. But once again, also, you don't want to burn toxic waste. And I would do the burning at night just so you don't, attract attention to yourself or your family. Also, be kind of mindful of where the wind is blowing, because if the wind is blowing right where your neighbors are, at least your immediate neighbors, they're not going to appreciate to have a bunch of smoke potentially going into their air intakes, and they have to smell that in their house. So out of respect, especially if you live really close to someone else and the wind is blowing in their direction, you may want to wait until the wind kind of settles or changes direction so it's not going to bother someone. Fire pits. When you have your own property, you can store above ground fire pits, and those are also typically made of stainless steel. Some of them have like a big bowl-like shape. They're just like almost like a small container in terms of its ability to hold stuff. They're not typically as effective as like a burn barrel, but they can still work. But for some people that deal with high winds, I get a lot of messages with people that live in areas that the winds can be just amazing and destructive. But it is helpful for some of those people because it can also, help generate electricity. They have wind turbines and things like that. But in terms of their garbage, people have reported that sometimes the high winds can really mess with a burn barrel, for example. And so in some situations, you may want to dig down in the ground to get a little bit of a wind buffer or to create a wind buffer so your fire doesn't get out of control or doesn't get blown out. I mean, it can happen in both ways. So you definitely want to keep your fire safe. Okay, now the next thing we talked about in the last video was to bury your garbage. When you have your own land, though, you can already have holes pre-dug. Now, you may say, why would you do that? I'm not going to do that and have holes in my yard. Well, this probably isn't going to be, something that the average suburbanite is going to do. And I probably wouldn't do it either. But for someone like myself that lives in a more rural area and that has a lot of acreage, I mean, just like a bunch of land, like most of my property, I don't even use. And there's parts of the property, what I have done was to pre-dug a few sets of holes. So if I need to get rid of waste and it just happens to be in the middle of winter and the ground is frozen, I can still put things in the holes and just tarp over it until, the ground thaws out. So it's just something to consider. May not be for everyone. But once again, if you're going to dig some holes, just in case. I would put them at low elevation or some of the lowest elevation on your property, away from water sources, away from where you live, from your actual, like, your house, well, as far as possible. So just some things to think about there. And we also have to make sure we dig deep enough and have enough of a covering of dirt and soil above our garbage so that animals don't dig our garbage back out. And we touched base on that in the last video as well. And of course, we don't want to use or store or bury toxic materials in the ground, because it could possibly cause problems in terms of if you ever need it for some reason to put a garden in that area. You might have soil that isn't going to be of high quality, and you don't want to mess with your water in your area, any kind of like water runoff. You don't want toxic problems from that. Okay, the next part here is to reuse, repurpose, and recycle as much as possible. And you can really do this when you have, especially a homestead, because you may have all types of tools that you can work on some of your waste and make it something that you can actually use, repurpose or recycle. So it's not all about just disposing of things or trying to just get rid of things. It might be more about how can we either fix the product that broke or maybe make it into something else that's going to serve a need of ours. So that's going to be a big thing. And in terms of like repurposing things, I think food scraps are a big thing that to consider, doing something with. Now, people in, especially those in an apartment situation, they're going to look at food scraps and they're not going to probably think much of it because they don't have typically a garden, because there's no land, so there is no garden. There are no animals either, to feed the scraps to. But if you can get into a habit of this and you have some land and, a garden in particular and animals, compost your food scraps or to feed it to your animals so that nothing goes to waste. Now, we also talked about in the last video that if you have issues with not being able to burn or bury for whatever reason, it may be that it's just snowing outside and it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to burn your stuff because the snow is coming down so hard, or maybe there's like a week long of rain. And so you just can't burn things because the fire would probably go out, or it's just way too cold to go outside. Maybe, I don't know. But what I can say is that you can bury your stuff. And if you can't do that either, because maybe once again the ground's frozen, you don't have holes that are pre-dug, whatever, then we have this last means here of storage. When you have your own buildings, outside of your actual home, it's so much easier to store things. Now, when you're in an apartment or a condo, you may not have any storage options than just your actual dwelling, just the few rooms in your actual, your house, if you will, just your apartment or condo. And so, yeah, when you have other buildings and you can put garbage, then you can completely keep your garbage out of your house. But I would say, though, when it's possible, though, I still would try to burn or bury the garbage appropriately. Okay. And of course, storage containers are a big deal here. We need to really focus on that. If you have room to store a few garbage cans, and I'm talking about good quality garbage cans that really seal up good, maybe have at least maybe a case or so of high quality commercial grade garbage bags. You want some stuff that can really hold garbage that isn't going to break down over time and so forth. And, in terms of places to store these bits of waste that you accumulate, you want to put them into buildings that are going to keep animals out. You don't want to put it into a barn if the barn they don't have any doors. I've seen a lot of barns that are just kind of open design. There's like an opening in the back, opening in the front, and animals can just, roam in and out at their pleasure, So you don't want to probably do that unless there's a room in the barn that you can secure. So I think that a shed or another building that you may have would be a better option, especially if it can be secure. And of course, we want to really focus as well on sanitation. I'm into the natural products. If you want to go the route of chemicals, that's your choice. I'm not a fan of bleach and ammonia and all these things, but there's a ton of natural products. And I'll just let you look into that. I might put a few things up on the screen here just to kind of as examples, but there's a lot of things that we need to kind of be mindful of about exposure to chemicals. And I think that there's so many natural products that can actually kill viruses and bacteria and so forth. There's no reason to have all these chemicals. So we talked about garbage bags, storing those as part of the sanitation plan, having gloves, disposable gloves. Now, this is kind of a tricky thing because you don't want to create a lot more garbage by just trying to handle the garbage. But this is one of those things, though, if you're going to make contact with garbage, you want to make sure that it doesn't cause a problem for you. So I think it's justifiable to have disposable medical gloves and also potentially face mask, especially if you're burning your garbage. There's a lot of people who have breathing issues, or they have sensitive, issues when it comes to breathing with their lungs. You may have a condition, so just be real careful and protect your lungs. Some type of face mask. It's going to probably be beneficial. And also you want to store extra water outside of the water for cooking and, just drinking and things like that. You want to have water for sanitation, so you can clean your dishes. Especially if you're not using like paper products, like paper plates and so forth, you're going to need extra water. And sometimes you just need to, wash something down and just maintain it. So common sense stuff. I would love to hear what you have to say about this topic here. I'll just give you an example. In my area, it's kind of what I would consider more of a semi-rural area. A lot of people, about every 2 weeks, they burn their garbage. Unfortunately, there are people who burn garbage that has, undesirable effects to the surroundings, and so basically they do burn some toxic stuff. And I don't like it. I don't do that. I really frown upon that. So don't be one of those people. Now, you may say, well, I have to get rid of this stuff. Yeah, but once again, the trade-off is, you're making the air toxic, making the ground toxic. You're possibly, exposing yourself to these chemicals that are released when you burn these toxic materials. You're possibly, exposing your neighbors and possibly animals in the area that you may actually harvest down the road as part of a survival plan. You may also accidentally poison your own pets or animals or livestock. So it's just not worth it. So don't burn toxic materials and don't bury that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that you would want to store until the crisis kind of calms down and you're able to remove these products off your property to a proper disposal location. So, hey, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Catch you later.